You're having a good day so far. Today we'll be doing our grade 7 English lesson on adjectives. So we'll be doing our grade 7 English lesson on adjectives. And our lesson today is a continuation of last time, or let's say our previous lesson, where we also did adjectives, and we specifically focused on identifying adjectives as well as order adjectives, right? And we said an adjective, it is, let's say, words that either tells us more about the noun, or you can say describes a noun, right? So those are adjectives. So we were able to identify adjectives last time as well as to order adjectives. So today is a continuation of what we did in our previous lesson, right, on adjectives. So before we go on to our lesson on adjectives, we're going to log into aplusstudents.ca. We're going to log in with our username as well as our password. Once we've selected our username, once we have logged in with our username as well as our password, then we're going to select the subject of language arts, grade 7, and then we're going to scroll down up until we get to the chapter of adjectives. And like I said in our previous lesson, we focused on identifying adjectives as well as ordering adjectives. And an adjective, it tells us more about the noun, or we can say it describes a noun, or we can even say it modifies a noun, right? And with adjectives, it either tells us what kind, or it can tell us how many. And basically, like we say, tells us about the noun, or it modifies a noun or describes a noun. And it tells us what kind of noun or how many of those nouns. Right now, today, like I say, our chapter is adjectives. Subject is language arts, which is English grade 7. And the lessons that we are focusing on today, right, is to form and use comparative as well as superlative adjectives. And then we're going to differentiate between good, better, best, bad, worse, and worst. So when to use those words, or even how to use those words, right? And that is basically an add-on of comparative and superlative adjectives. So it's comparing, and we will find out that comparative adjectives, it ends in er. It's comparing two, let's say two things, two people or two places or two animal, and then it ends in er. And then superlative adjectives, it's comparing two or more things, right? And it ends in est. And like I say, when it comes to good, better, or best, bad, worse, or worst, this is also comparative adjectives. And we call these irregular adjectives. They are irregular. And the reason why we say they are irregular is because they do not follow the rules of what the comparative adjectives is in. We add er, or superlative we add est. Because we don't say gooder or goodest. We don't say betterer or betterest, right? The same with bad. You don't say the baddest, the worstest, right? You say bad, worse, worst. That is if you want to now really compare it. But we will go more deeper into it as we are basically, let's say, going over our lesson or continuing our lesson. And we are doing our tutorial lesson on aplusstudents.ca. All right, so now we're going on to our first one, which is actually first to differentiate between what is a comparative adjective once again, as well as a superlative adjective. And a comparative adjective, right, it compares a thing or group to some other thing or group, meaning we are comparing two things, right? Can either be a person we are comparing, it can be an animal we're comparing, it can be a place we're comparing, right? Or a thing we comparing, but we are comparing two things, right? And when we are comparing these two things, then they usually end in ER. So when we are comparing two things, it ends in ER. And then we have our superlative adjectives, right? And in superlative adjectives, right, it says it compares a thing or group of things to a larger group that it is part of, meaning that we are comparing two or more things, two or more people, two or more places, two or more animals, two or more things, right? And they usually end in EST. That is not our superlative adjectives once we compare it to large group parts. And comparative adjectives ends in ER when we compare that thing to some other thing or other group. And for most of our adjectives, right? For most of our adjectives, when we compare, then when we basically just add ER to make the comparative adjective, and we add EST to make the superlative adjective. And an example is, right? For example, our base word, the word that can basically stand on its own, is, for example, tall, right? Just an example, tall. For example, it's like we're saying he is tall. But now if we are comparing him to someone else, then we can say he is taller than. Let us draw the right sentences. Let's put it over here. All right, so our base word, I'm going to put the base word here. So the base word is tall, right? So if we compare this to, it's like we're just comparing two things, right? Two people, two places. So we're not going to compare him to someone else. So we can maybe say Jack is tall, right? So tall, because that's our base word. But now if we compare Jack to Jill, for example, then we can say Jack is taller than Jill. You see, so now we are comparing him to another person. So we are now comparing these two people, which is Jack, and we're comparing Jill to one another, right? And we call this a comparative adjective. And we added our ER to our base word, which is tall. Now, if we compare Jack to a larger group, right? Meaning we compare Jack to two or more people. Let's say maybe in class, we compare Jack to all of the boys in class, which is a larger group. Now we can say Jack is the tallest in class. And as you can see, tallest. And our base word ends in EST. So this, let me use a different, like we say, this is our base word. Over here, by adding ER, this is our comparative adjective. And over here, where it ends in EST, this is our superlative adjective. So that basically shows the comparisons, right? We say the comparative adjective, it compares to people, places, or things. And a superlative adjective, it compares either a larger group or it compares two or more people, places, or things, right? And it ends in EST. All right. So now we also have adjectives, right, which is good and bad. And we call those irregular adjectives, right? And the irregular adjectives, right, it's for example where our base words are either good or our base word is bad. And if we compare, we use both comparison as well as we use superlative, right? So if we, let's say, all right, so if we compare, let's say, Skylar, right? So our base word is good. So we can say Skylar is good at drawing, right? So which means that she's good at drawing, right? Good is our base word. She's good. That is her alone. But now if we compare her to someone else, then we can maybe say Skylar is, it's a better artist. Let's maybe use the word artist than, let's give a word Zia, right? So now we're comparing Skylar as well as Zia because Zia is also maybe an artist. Skylar is also an artist. So now we say Skylar is a better artist than Zia. So we don't say Skylar is a gooder because we are showing the comparison adjective. No, we're not doing that. We're saying now better, right? Because now we know that the adjective is irregular. So we say Skylar is a better artist than Zia. But now if we want to compare Skylar to, let's say, a larger group, right? Then we can say Skylar is the best artist, let's say maybe at school. So now we are basically comparing Skylar to the whole school. So we don't say she is the goodest or the gooder, right? So which means that you must say Skylar is good. That is our base word. And if we compare Skylar to someone else, then then we can say Skylar is a better artist, meaning she's better than. And if we compare her maybe to the rest of the class, to let's say maybe all of the artists or the whole school, just an example, then we can say Skylar is the best artist at school. And that is how we show the comparison, whether it is in comparative form or it is in a superlative form. And these are irregular adjectives. We don't follow the rules of just adding er or adding an est, right? The regular comparative adjectives will have your base word, and then if we compare, use the comparative form, we add er, and if we use the superlative form, we add est. But when it comes to the irregular adjectives, for example, like good or bad, then our word basically changes. For example, like good. So good. If we compare them to another person, we say the person is better. If we compare that person to a larger group, and then we can say this person is the best amongst everybody else. Right? And these are once again irregular adjectives. Irregular adjectives. And then the same with bad, where we can say Alex is bad at maths or in maths. But now we can say Alex is bad in maths, but Sarah is worse, or Sarah did worse than Alex in maths. So now we're comparing Sarah to Alex or Alex to Sarah when it comes to results in maths. So basically, Alex is bad, Sarah did worse in maths. But now if we compare it to a larger group, then we can maybe say, but Leah is the worst or did the worst, meaning she got like maybe 1 out of 50 or something. That is just an example. And once again, this is also an irregular adjective. All right, so now we're moving along and we said that we are doing our tutorial lesson on a+students.ca. And now we're going to form and use comparative adjective. And we basically explained all of this already. So we need to complete the sentence with the correct comparative and superlative adjective. The molasses cookie that Kimberly bought at the bake sale was than the brownie. Do we say it was better than the brownie? Because now it says that you can use adjective to compare people, places, or things. So the molasses cookie that Kimberly bought at the bake sale. Oh, we must use the word moist. Was moister than the brownie. So they want us to use the word moist. So we can then say it was moister. Wasn't dry. So the brownie, yes, was moist, but the molasses cookie that Kimberly bought at the bake sale was moister than the brownie. And as we can see, it ends in ER, which means that this is a comparative adjective and it compares, for example, the molasses cookie to the brownie. Eddie's explanation of the water cycle was much. Our base word is brief. So our base word is brief. Now it says Eddie's explanation of the water cycle was much than the one in the biology textbook. And if we compare, right, Eddie's explanation of the water cycle to the one in the biology book, we can say his explanation was much briefer. It was much briefer than the one in my biology textbook. And as you can see, it is basically two people, two things that is being compared. And that is a comparative adjective. And it ends in ER. Prefer. Right? All right. Now let's go and do our test. We need to choose the correct either comparative or superlative adjective to complete the sentence. According to the news report I saw yesterday, last summer was the, do we say coolest summer on record, or last summer was the cool summer on record? So, according to the news report I saw yesterday, last summer was the coolest summer on record, or last summer was the cool summer on record. Which one is the correct answer? All right, so if we choose the correct one, we can then say it was the coolest summer on record. So coolest. It's like you're comparing that one summer to all the other summers. Miss Everett prefers living in California because the climate is much, do we say, milder than Minnesota, where she grew up, or it is much mild. And we are comparing two places. So we can say Miss Everett prefers living in California because the climate is much, do we say, milder than Minnesota, where she grew up, or it is much mild. And if we choose the correct one, we can say it is much milder because now we're comparing California to Minnesota. So it is much milder where she grew up. We are comparing the climates. The molasses cookie that Elise bought at the bake sale was, do we say it was moist than the brownie, or it was moister than the brownie? Do we say it was moist than the brownie, or it was moister than the brownie? And we can say it was more moister than the brownie. Once again, comparing two things. So it's a comparative adjective. So it was moister. Of all the contestants on the game show, the gentleman from Detroit had the, do we say, the broadest knowledge of international affairs, or had the broad knowledge of international affairs? So, of all the contestants on the game show, the gentleman from Detroit had the, do we say, the broadest knowledge of international affairs, meaning that his knowledge was was the broadest amongst everybody else's that was there. So broadest it is. And in Tim's explanation of the water cycle was much, do we say, brief than the one in my biology class, or it was much briefer than the one in my biology class? So we will say that his explanation was much briefer than the one in the biology textbook. Briefer. All right, let's do the last one of this one. It says, according to the news report I saw yesterday, last summer, do we say was the cool or coolest summer on record? So we can say it was the coolest summer on record. So coolest it is. All right, so that was form and using comparative and superlative adjectives. Now we're going to good, better, best, bad, worse, and worst. All right, so now we said we still have comparative adjectives as well as we have superlative adjectives, right? And a comparative adjective, it basically just compares two people or places or things, and they usually end in er. I remember we said that when, even though we have comparative as well as superlative adjectives, right? When it comes to irregular adjectives, right? And then it's as if the word changes. So now we don't just add er or est to a specific word, especially the irregular adjectives, right? So, for example, it will be good, better, best, bad, worse, worst. All right. So now, and there we made earlier an example of good, better, best, bad, worst, and worse. So I honestly feel like, you know, not to go over that again. Because good is our base word, better is comparing two people, places, or things, and the best is comparing it to a larger group. And the same with the bad. Bad is our base word. Then worse is like comparing it to either one person, place, thing. And then worst is like when it is being compared to a large group or the whole class or so on. Now we need to complete the sentence with the correct comparative or superlative adjective. In 1998, the publishing company Modern Library selected James John Joseph's Ulysses as the English novel of 20th century. So we can then say as the best. So as the best English novel of the 20th century. So which means that if they say the novel of the 20th century, then it means that it stands out. It is being compared to a larger group. Many music enthusiasts debate about whether digital recordings of songs sounds does it sound do we say does it sound bad, worse, or worst than vinyl records? And if they basically show about whether digital recordings, we are comparing now to vinyl recordings or records, which means that many music enthusiasts debate about whether digital recordings of songs sound, maybe let's say bad. And if we're comparing this to a larger group, and then it's going to be worst. So the sound sounds worst. But we can't say worse, we can only say worse. Say worse than the vinyl records. So worse is our answer where we're comparing the digital record songs to the vinyl record songs. Now we're going on to our test. And don't forget that these adjectives are irregular. Janet looked through the Janet looked through all of the biscuit recipes in her cookbook and finally found the one that looked the is it the good or the best? So she finally found one that looks the, do we say looks the good or looks the best? So we say Janet looked through all of the biscuit recipes in her cookbook and finally found the one that looked and we can say looked the best because you can't say looked the good, right? Looked the best. And best is correct. And after researching dog breed, I think the collie is do we say the good breed to have around small children or the best breed to have around small children? So we can say, I think the collie is the best breed to have around small children. So the best it is. Yes, so best is correct. So well done. Best is correct. So do we say that the battle for parking that Jaden had ever faced was trying to find a space in downtown San Francisco? Do we say the bad battle or the worst battle for parking? So we can say the worst. Yes, so the worst battle for parking that Jaden had ever faced was trying to find a space in downtown San Francisco. And worst is the correct word because we can't say the bad, right? But the worst. And that is a superlative adjective. The worst. So well done. That is correct. And worst is correct. And then I've tried many different cold remedies over the years, and drinking plenty of fluids is do we say, is the good one I have found so far, or is the best one that I've found so far? All right, so we can say that drinking plenty of water is the best one I have found so far, and the best is correct. Well done. The best is correct. Yep. There's good, better, best, meaning that there is a superlative adjective. And this is do we say it's the bad talent show I've ever been to, or this is the worst talent show I've ever been in? Blanca mumbled under her breath as she walked off stage. So this is the bad, or this is the worst. And we can then say that this is the worst talent show I've ever been in. All right, so well done. Worst is correct. So we can say, I have to confess that I had do we say, a good time at the football rally, then the antique auction, or I have to confess that I had a better time at the football rally than at the antique auction. And remember, we are comparing, right? So it says, I have to confess that I had a, do we say, a good time at the football rally than the antique auction? Or I had to confess that I had a better time at the football rally than at the um, auction. Because now we are comparing, right? And if we choose either the comparative or superlative form, then we can say I've had a better time at the football rally than at the antique auction. Because now we are comparing the two, being at the football rally compared to the antique auction. So it's good, better, best. So better is the comparative adjective. And well done, better is correct. Because remember, we are comparing two things, or we're comparing two or more things, right? So well done, better is correct. And then in the summer of 1793, one of the, do we say one of the bad yellow fever outbreaks, or one of the worst yellow fever outbreaks in the history strip through the streets of Philadelphia? Do we say one of the bad or one of the worst? All right, so we can say in the summer of 1793, one of the, can say the worst fever outbreaks in history swept through the streets of Philadelphia. All right, and worst is correct. So well done, well done. Worst is totally correct. All right, so that is now the end of our lesson, grade sevens, on adjectives, right? And today we had to form and use comparative and superlative adjectives, as well as good, better, best, bad, worse, and worst, right? And how to basically form as well as to use either the irregular adjectives like good, better, best, or bad, worse, and worst. All right, so that is my end of our lesson on adjective. Thank you very much for joining our class, and I really hope you're going to have a good day further. Goodbye.